Have you been diagnosed with low thyroid or suspect you have low thyroid?
If so, then stick around for our next video. We're going to dig deeper into all the questions you need to know about thyroid testing.
Hi, welcome to Sage Health TV. I'm Dr. Angela Yeagley, and I'm here with my great friend and colleague, Dr. Anastasia Joan.
Hello.
Today we're talking about Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It's actually a very common condition, but that is often misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed. It's a form of hypothyroidism, which is low thyroid, and many people, some of the top things someone might experience with Hashimoto's would be, say, chronic fatigue or extended weight gain that is difficult to address. But there are many other things that are associated with Hashimoto's and many other things someone would, symptoms somebody might experience. Dr. Anastasia, can you tell us why, what other things, like why would somebody want to know about Hashimoto's?
Well, one thing I think that's really important and why people need to know about this condition is that there's a huge number of people walking around with this condition. It is a form of hypothyroid, and it's really, really common. There's probably about 20 million people in the U.S. that are diagnosed with it, and that's maybe only about 10 or 20% of the people who actually probably have it. So there's all these people that are experiencing, like you may have mentioned, fatigue, weight gain, but there's so many other symptoms that that present that we see.
So other things might be like very dry skin, depression, anxiety, difficulty with digestion, super elevated cholesterol, and other digestive issues outside of constipation.
And some of the things that I'll see as well, that just, I think, aren't on the radar for a lot of conventional primary care docs, maybe, especially if they're not spending a lot of time with their patients, so they don't get the whole story, is depression is a big one, chronic fatigue, like you mentioned, but depression or sometimes even anxiety, insomnia or excessive sleeping. So it can really be kind of flip sides of the coin. The same condition can cause this. And what can happen sometimes is people come into their doctor and they're like, I'm not feeling well, feeling pretty tired. I'm just feeling really low. And they're offered an antidepressant before they're offered tests that would really look deeper into what might be going on with them. And oftentimes it could be Hashimoto's.
Right. So, so when somebody is thinking about, how would we we've actually treated Hashimoto's and low thyroid for many, many years. So when somebody's looking, what are the things that someone's doctor or the patient is looking for to?
So here's what I look at. And that's why when we said people are misdiagnosed or, undiagnosed, but also people are often underdiagnosed. So oftentimes they may get a screening test called a TSH, and that's the most common one. It's one that most insurances will cover right off the bat. And so sometimes people don't go any deeper than that. A TSH is just a screening test for low thyroid, and the ranges are set pretty high, the conventional ranges. So somebody might be subclinical. They might come in they might fall within that range and be told, oh, your thyroid's fine, or they might be elevated and be told, oh, you have low thyroid. I'm going to give you this pill. They get the pill, they take it, they're still not feeling right. So they've been diagnosed with low thyroid, but they've never been evaluated more in depth to look at how your thyroid's really functioning, and also look at what the cause is. Is there an autoimmune condition happening? Why is your thyroid not functioning? And so they get it's almost like they get half a diagnosis.
Right. So we look at free T3, free T4, and then more specifically related to Hashimoto's is the TPO and the TG antibodies, the thyroid peroxidase and the thyroglobulin.
And those
antibodies.
those are diagnostic of it. But the thing about those TPO antibodies is that somebody can have, I've had patients that their antibodies, these are autoantibodies. So this is an autoimmune condition where the body is attacking this thyroid. I've had people off the charts with their numbers, literally numbers that are higher than the lab will test for. And yet their TSH might be just moderately elevated, and their free T4 and free T3 might be in the normal range because their body is compensating, but they just they get their thyroid medication and they still just don't feel good.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there definitely is a different way that we would approach just standard low thyroid that's not Hashimoto's versus a Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
Definitely.
And so, thinking about we go deeper, with an autoimmune condition, we go deeper and we really look at it's so important, what is the root cause, of this underlying autoimmune condition. So can we talk about a little bit of what are some of those root causes?
Definitely. And I think this is so important. So one, you get the initial diagnosis, that's just kind of skimming the surface. We know that this person has Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune. I will look at other markers of autoimmunity. So I will look at other antibodies, because oftentimes, this is not isolated just to the thyroid. It can be a systemic whole body disease or the autoimmunity. So testing for other antibodies, and then looking at what is causing the body basically to attack itself. So there's several factors. I kind of break them down into 5 categories, and we can look at those a little deeper. One is genetics. That's really, really important, because genetics are something clearly we can't change, but we can change. It can help guide how we treat, and we can see, does this person have genetic challenges basically synthesizing the right hormones or detoxifying, and is that playing into it? And that's something that I know you test for a lot, like those genetic panels.
Definitely the metabolic pathways for clearing out, irritants or chemicals that someone might have been exposed to can absolutely be compromised by someone's genetics. But they certainly, once we know about them, can be optimized.
Exactly.
We are things that we can do specifically for that person that's going to help them directly, right?
And then the second one that's important to look at is people's nutritional status. So there's all these really important nutrients to look at, and whether people are getting them and just not utilizing them well, or just they're missing in their diet. But some really important ones are selenium, that helps the body to actually convert T4 to T3. Tyrosine is a really important amino acid for making thyroid hormone. Iodine is really important, and that can be critical in Hashimoto's. Having too little or too much can really be a problem there. And just vitamin D. There's a high association with low vitamin D in Hashimoto's and other autoimmune diseases.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And then, so after we look at and we correct deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies, and there's different ways to measure that. And sometimes, again, like you mentioned, there's some very common ones that we see with that condition. And so we look for directly. But then we get into, what could be present in the body that actually, that possibly triggered and is worsening the autoimmune condition.
Yeah, and that's where we get into the environmental factor, because I don't think that autoimmune conditions happen like Hashimoto's unless there is that trigger, that environmental concern. And what I see most often is high levels of heavy metals. Mercury is a big one, and these can be through past exposures where the body just hasn't cleansed them, or through ongoing exposures. Mercury and lead are big ones that I see, and those are something we can really easily test for. And then the other thing that's really, really important is looking at the GI, looking at the gut. And if there's imbalances there, then that can really activate things in the body. That can be the microbiome's out of balance, not having good bacteria or too much bad bacteria, or other things that have damaged the gut and are causing intestinal permeability. Sometimes people call it leaky gut, where things are getting into the bloodstream essentially, and our immune system sees that and starts to attack self. It triggers a hyperreactivity. So
Yeah. And there sometimes also could be things living in the intestines that we would call bad, pathogenic. And we can also screen for that, because we want to always in autoimmune, we want to optimize the gut. We want the gut really needs to be healthy to move health forward. And then really the last part, and another part we can screen for that's directly related to Hashimoto's, is just fascinating, is actually a viral connection.
Yeah, that's the 5th one. I was thinking as well. So, and I've seen EBV be a common one. That's Epstein-Barr. But once again, it's what's called molecular mimicry or cross-reactivity, where there's this little virus in the body that's flagging the immune system, and that immune system goes to react, but becomes hyperreactive and starts to attack self. So those are areas that are really important. And once again, you get the diagnosis, you start to treat the symptoms, but then we keep digging. We want to find the cause so people can actually heal, go into remission from, because people can go into Hashimoto's, go into remission from Hashimoto's and heal. Yeah.
So. And we've seen cases of that.
Definitely. Definitely.
And I think we were talking about someone that you had worked with that had amazing results.
Yeah. This is kind of one of my favorite stories of a patient with Hashimoto's. It was the very first person I diagnosed. And, when I was just learning about it fresh into practice, a decade or 10 or 11 years ago. And a patient of mine brought her husband in, and he was a young Japanese man, maybe about 30. And the only thing he really seemed to have going on was he didn't have really any of the symptoms you would see with low thyroid, or that I knew of at the time, except she brought him in for depression. And we started to talk, and I was going to do a workup on him. And at the last minute he said, but I'm cold all the time. And I was like, oh, let's check his TSH.
Yes.
And that was before I even knew to check antibodies. And back came a really high TSH. I threw on the antibodies. They were through the roof. And so we started treating him with a natural thyroid medication. And in the meantime, tested him for heavy metals and for gluten sensitivity, because gluten is a big one in those environmental factors. And over the course of about a year, we were able to clear the metals, get him on a gluten-free diet, and get him off of his thyroid meds. And over that course of time, he started to feel really good. So that story really sticks with me, because I almost missed it. I almost missed it. If he just hadn't given me that one little tip, I would have missed it, the way so many people walk around, because their symptoms just aren't connected.
Right. Or maybe they might not have the classic symptoms that you think of with somebody with low thyroid, like that fatigue and the weight gain. You don't always have that.
Oh yeah. I've had plenty of patients that seem high energy. They're, they're kind of bouncing off the walls. It's like
it's the initial too much stimulation.
A stimulated energy, and they're thin, and they come back with Hashimoto's, and they're like, oh God, no wonder I feel like.
Yeah, and just comes back to the importance of really having an in-depth screening, and like when if something is not directly diagnosed or obvious, or say if it's treated, but the symptoms aren't really changing, right? That's when we really want to go deeper and figure out, again, coming into the root cause of what's really going on.
Exactly. It's not just about the numbers changing on the labs either. It's about the patient feeling better.
Yeah.
Feeling like themselves again.
So this is something, low thyroid Hashimoto's is something that we see a lot, and we treat often. Unfortunately, it is very common, and really have helped people through, and to get them to a place where they feel amazing, and, and the symptoms that they were experiencing really reduce completely, either, reduce or they go away completely, which is incredible.
So if this is something that resonates with you feel like, I'm having some of these symptoms, or I feel like I really haven't been evaluated very well or very deeply for some of the stuff going on with me, really encourage you to have a conversation with your doctor, if they're open to it. Get some of these tests run. We're also open to meeting with you and helping identify whether you have Hashimoto's or some other condition that we can help you correct and get to the root cause of.
Right. Yes. Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And if you'd like more information, you can reach us through sagemedclinic.com, and we hope to see you next time.
Yep. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.